In today's video, I'm going to give you my review on the Torklift Glowstep Revolution Uprising. Now, over the years, several of my viewers have recommended these to me, and my only regret is waiting so long to give them a try. So Torklift agreed to send me a set to review, and I got to say, after using them and putting them through really a variety of tests, I am super impressed with these guys. So I'm going to give you my candid thoughts, as always. We're going to do a deep dive on them, of course. But I gotta say, this is one of the few products I've reviewed recently, at least, that I'm really impressed, just truly impressed all the way around. I think it's a premium product. It really delivers on what it promises. And so in today's video, I'm gonna share all the different problems that it solves. I'm gonna give you a full in-depth look at all the features. We'll even do some comparisons on the Torklift steps versus the old drawbridge steps. And then finally, I'm gonna recommend who should buy this. Now stick around to the very end of the video because I'm gonna make a surprising recommendation at the very end that kind of goes against the current trend by RV manufacturers. So to kick off the review, let's start by talking about the problems that this solves, the problems that the Torklift Glowstep Revolution Uprising actually solves, right? Because after all, that's why we buy products. Oftentimes they solve problems and they give us benefits. And so the first problem that this solves has to do with clearance. You can see I'm at my RV storage site right here, and every time that I park it here and back it in, I have to painstakingly make sure that I have 55 inches at least of clearance between the RV wall and my barn wall so that I can fold out these traditional drawbridge style steps. And that takes a lot of time. So here with these Torklift Glowstep Revolution Uprising, I no longer have to worry about that. And I'll talk about the specific clearances here a little bit later in the video, but that is the first problem that they solve. The second problem they solve has to do with obstacles. And this is a problem that I find personally I encounter probably about a quarter of the time, especially when I'm staying at state parks. And that is where you have an obstacle, and let's just pretend like this 2x4 is a timber at your campsite, and you know, you've backed in, you've got the perfect clearance on both sides of your RV with your slides and everything and other trees and obstacles, and then you go to put out your steps and you find that there you land right on the timber, or halfway on, halfway off. And so then you gotta, you know, back up and kind of recenter it, finagle it to make the steps work. Well, with these Torklift steps, that's no longer an issue because of the flexibility. You can deploy them at different pitches, at different rates, and so it gives you that flexibility when you encounter obstacles. And the third problem that it solves is kind of tied to that same flexibility. So think just a minute with me, all the different RVs out there, the different brands, there's not a standard height to the bottom of the entry door, meaning the dimension here at the bottom of the entry door down to the ground at your campsite is different for every single RV brand, perhaps even within a lineup or even a model. It's going to be different. And so that RV brand then has to choose a compatible step system, but they're limited to choosing, you know, 4 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps, whatever they think will fit best that RV. But what if that height there is such that you're kind of in between, and sometimes you want 4 steps, sometimes you want 5 steps? Well, with the traditional drawbridge steps, you're going to have to be locked in to having a fixed number of steps. So then at your campsite, let's say that it's pitched really unlevel, then you're either going to have a really big step at your last one or a really tiny step. Well, with the Torklift Glowstep Revolution Uprising, that's no longer an issue because they give you this booster step. So you can choose, depending on your campsite, whether you want 5 steps or whether you want 4 steps. There's a lot of flexibility built in there. So those are the main problems that it solves, but let me transition now to giving you a product overview. We'll jump into the features, and just for the sake of efficiency, I'm gonna incorporate my likes and dislikes here as well. And the first one has gotta be the overall appearance. I mean, just check out how sharp these steps look when they're all unfolded. You got all aluminum construction here. Check out how beefy the supports are on the scissor action. They've doubled up here. Then of course you got stainless steel on the hardware. I like the pattern that's on each of the steps for grip, for texture. And then notice how they even incorporated this little detail with some luminescence markers, so you got some passive lighting. At nighttime, they kind of glow in the dark. The front of the steps are ever so slightly rounded here on the profile on that nosing, and then there's some more ribs along the front there for grip. And of course the support legs that rest on the ground, that gives them the stability just like the solid steps, but they do give you adjustment here about 8 inches up and down for that support. And I like that there's not a pin or something you have to pull out that you could lose. They've just got a simple spring-loaded push button, and that lets you adjust up and down, and of course each one is independent. And check out this detail on the bottom of these support legs. Notice how they've incorporated 4 giant pads on the bottom of them. So imagine that you're at a really nice campsite, maybe it's got stamped concrete and you don't want to scratch that up. Well, they've already incorporated those pads on there, and I think these kinds of details just speak to the quality and the thought that went into designing this product. Now, another detail that I really like that I'll point out has to do with this top step here, and that is with conventional drawbridge steps, the rise is going to be the same. In other words, the height between each step going all the way up to your door is going to be the same. Usually that's about 8 to 8 1/4. That's pretty standard. Now, for comparison here on the Torklift steps, the way I've got them deployed right now, it's just over 7, about 7 1/4, but that's going to vary too. It could be 7 to 8, just depending on how far I've got them deployed. But check out on this top step here, the rise, the height going into the RV is significantly less. In fact, if I open the door, you can kind of see this visually a little bit better here. If I put my tape here, it's only about just under 4 inches. And I really like this a lot from a safety standpoint, because think about it, when you open your RV door and you come out, you're transitioning from one space to another, and most RV steps drop down a full 8 inches to that first step, and that's a big amount of distance if you're coming out of your RV like that. So I like that they lessened that rise on this first step to only about 3 or 4 inches, kind of depending on how they're deployed. It just feels a lot safer. It's almost like a mini landing coming out of your RV. Another detail that I almost forgot to mention has to do with this old 2x4. And if you're wondering what is this doing in the video, well, I was pleasantly surprised that when I was opening the original packaging from the manufacturer, the way that they shipped it to me, they had actually used this old 2x4 kind of as a rigid support here on the stair assembly between these two ears so that they wouldn't get bent in shipping. And this is a really important detail because, you know, ground shipping companies are brutal sometimes. The abuse that they go through, the packaging, especially when you get a large heavy item like this. So the fact that the manufacturer had the foresight to put something rigid like this as packaging to support those ears so that they don't get damaged, to me that just speaks again to the attention to detail and care. They want to make sure this product gets to you undamaged. And while we've got the door opened, I'll take you inside to show you some of those details. First one is, notice on the threshold they've got grip tape running all the way across in both directions there, so you don't have to worry about slipping on that threshold. Inside the RV, I really like how slim the profile is here on these mounting brackets. Compare that to the old drawbridge style steps where I had this big metal box here, you know, the one that's encasing the gas support props that always makes that clanging sound. Yeah, that sound, you know, when you bump it with your toe. None of that here on these steps, just a slim bracket there. And while we're inside here, let me point out one other detail that didn't quite make it into my install video. Of course, if you haven't seen that one, be sure to check it out. But it has to do with this casing here on the door jamb. Now, this detail is going to vary based on your RV brand and just how they trimmed out your RV inside. But here on my Jayco Pinnacle, I had an entirely different piece of casing running up here on the door, and it was actually split right about here because the old drawbridge steps had a flange that went out about this high. In fact, here's the old piece that was behind that flange, and in my install video I painstakingly went through the trouble of notching it out down here so that the new bracket could fit and not lay on top of this wooden trim piece. Now, I had planned in my install video to just cover up this trim piece here because this is not really finished trim, it was more like a backer strip, and put something over it more attractive. But the problem was, you can see it stopped right about here, and then I had the nice finished trim going up. And so the more I thought about it, I decided just to take off this entire trim piece on the door going all the way up and replace it with one. That way I've got a seamless piece going all the way up from the top to the bottom. And actually I was able to find this at my local home center. Check out the profile on here. You can see how this fits perfectly over the wall here and then covers the flange of your door, having that little notch in there, that reveal. And so this is a pretty standard profile. I think it worked perfectly in my case. I was able to notch just a little bit of it down there to fit around the bracket, and then, you know, stain it to match. But I really like the look here, how it turned out, having one seamless piece of trim. And again, that detail is going to vary based on your RV manufacturer. I mean, you may have no trim here whatsoever, and so you don't have to worry about notching anything out where this bracket mounts to your door flange. But I mention it because if you do have trim, it's very easy to find a profile like this and replace it and stain and everything to make it look real OEM and factory. Now, next up, I want to demonstrate the flexibility of these steps here. And this is really one of my favorite features of the steps. So I've got a tape measure pulled out. It's lined up with the outside wall of my RV here and then perpendicular straight out to the wall. And so I want to demonstrate some different rates, deploying the steps, you know, different rates and what they look like. So you can see right now, again, starting at the RV wall, going all the way out, it's about 55 inches to the barn wall. You can see I've run out of space on the tape here. So they are fully deployed and stretched out all the way here on the steps, including this bottom booster step. So when you've got everything stretched and pulled all the way out, you know, for your maximum distance here, you can see it's going to fall right about, I'd say, 53 inches or so to the tip of that foot. Again, that's pulled all the way out. Now, this is how I would have the stairs deployed if I was at a campsite, you know, and I've got plenty of room, no obstacles whatsoever, and I just want to spread out all the way and have all 5 of my steps for a real comfortable stair experience. So you can see how stable, how solid that feels. Really comfortable going in and out. For those curious, I'm a solid 200 pounds, so you can kind of get an idea of the flex there on the steps. But suppose that you've got maybe an obstacle right here and you can't deploy the steps all the way out to that 53 inches. Let me show you how easy and simple it is. Let's say we need to go to about 48 inches right there. So you can see I just moved it to 48 inches. We still got a very comfortable staircase here, very stable. To collapse the steps, you're just going to grab it by the bottom tread, lift up, and you kind of push in. You'll see that scissor action there. There is some friction here on it, not too much, not too little. I think they got the friction just right there. And then you'll notice if you've got this booster step deployed, as I do in my case, there's a lever over here that you press, and that allows you to fold that one up in there. So you can kind of see what that looks like. You'll also notice that once you get the stairs folded up, you can let it rest here. So it's not as if you have to support that entire weight the whole time. If you want to take a break and leave them right here, the friction's holding them from deploying fully. So that's kind of a nice feature too. But to go all the way up, you just lift it here and just with one arm, go right in there. And there's some studs that it then rests on. Now, for those curious, wondering how heavy does this feel, opening and closing, the best thing I can relate to, that I think you'll be able to relate to as well, is if you have a pair of drawbridge steps without the strut assist, without the gas prop assist. I had them on my last RV, and this, to me, feels like about that same weight going up and down. So if you know what that feels like, I think that's about a fair assessment of what this feels like going up and down every time that you collapse these steps there. But let me further demonstrate the flexibility of these steps and deploy them at some different rates. And so let's just pretend like we've got some obstacles, a very narrow campsite perhaps, and we just don't have as much room to deploy these. So this time, I am not going to deploy the bottom booster steps. So you can see right off the bat that they're at a slight angle. Well, no problem, because we'll just adjust these feet down here. And there you go, it's pretty much level now. Now we've got a comfortable staircase going into the RV, and these are only deployed, to get this, about 36 inches off of the RV wall. Compare that to the 53 inches fully extended. So the bottom line is you've got a ton of flexibility depending on how far out you need to deploy them. Again, we're at 27 inches now, 39 inches, 45 inches, and that's about as far out as it goes without that booster step deployed. And again, once we get the booster step deployed, then we can go all the way out to about 53. What other RV stair system allows you to choose between how many steps and change it from campsite to campsite? I've got, 4 steps deployed right now, but what if I want 5? No problem, right? I mean, arguably the height of my entry door here on the RV is kind of in between stair sizes. And so if I had a 4 stair step system, then some campsites I'm gonna have a really big step at the bottom. If I go to a 5 step system, then some campsites I might have 2 small of a step at the bottom. And that's the beauty here of having that booster step. I think in my case, probably half the campsites I visit, I'm gonna have it just like this with 4 steps, and probably the other half, I'll have that booster step deployed, just depending on the terrain of the campsite and how level everything is. Last thing I'll demonstrate concerning the flexibility is the absolute minimum clearance to deploy these steps if you're really in a pinch. So let's go ahead and fold them up here. You can see I've got them all the way pushed up tight here. It's resting here in the groove. I've got the legs all the way up to their highest setting. And so now let's take a tape measure off the sidewall of the RV, and you can see just under 19 inches of clearance. And remember, you've got a door on your RV that's got to swing open too. And so really then the door on your RV becomes the limiting factor. You know, I've got a 30-inch door. You've got to swing that door open first, obviously, to get access to your RV. So in my case, the door ends up being the limiting factor rather than the steps. Compare that to before, where I needed 55 inches with the solid drawbridge steps. Now I only need less than 19 inches of clearance on these guys. Last feature I'll mention, and I really like this, is basically icing on the cake. But check this out right here. They call this the Dirt Destroyer. And basically you take it and it just kind of clips on to the stair system there. And now you can use this to clean off your dirty shoes or your boots. You know, 7 years ago, I bought this when I started RVing, and I've carried it with me pretty much everywhere. And it does the same purpose, but this thing rests on the ground. So if you're at a, muddy campsite, then this gets all muddy. I really like this. It's like they've built a better mousetrap. And so this is an accessory that you can get with these steps. And I really think that's a clever detail. All right, so I've spent all that time demonstrating and talking about all the features that I really like on this stair system. But what about my dislikes? I always want to be transparent with you. And to be candid, I had a really hard time thinking of some, because I'm telling you, the manufacturer has really carefully thought through this entire design, and you can just tell this is several iterations into it. They've really put a lot of thought into it. But being completely transparent, there are 2 things that I came up with that fall into that dislike category that I just want to mention to you so that you are aware of them. And the first one is pretty minor, but it has to do with this support leg. And so obviously you need this support leg because that's what gives this stair system its stability, resting on the ground, right? But you'll notice it does stick up a little bit. And I think it's kind of emphasized here at my storage site because I've got a barn wall here. And so to get access to the steps, naturally, I'm walking across the tread here, whereas normally I'd be coming from this direction here. And so I mention that because it is kind of like a trip point or something. If you're not paying attention and you're coming from the side for whatever reason of your RV, you're not paying attention, you could catch that and topple over. So you just need to be aware of it. I don't think there's anywhere they could move this where it's not right there. And so, I mean, it has to be there for the stability of the steps. But I just mentioned that. Watch out, make sure your kids know about it so that they're not tripping on the steps. Second dislike I'll mention, and really on the contrary, this is the major selling point for the traditional drawbridge style steps. Lippert calls them solid steps, Moride calls them step above, and they are rock solid. I mean, you don't feel any flex going up and down. And I'll put some video footage up comparing the two. But naturally, when you've got this scissor design here, there's going to be some flex. There has to be, in order to have all that flexibility coming in and out. Now that flex, I think, is minimal, and all the other benefits, in my opinion, far outweigh the amount of flex. But for those curious, wondering, well, how much flex does it feel like when you're right in the middle of the staircase? And again, I'll put some B-roll video footage up so you can see what that looks like. Again, I'm a solid 200 pounds. If I had to rate the solid steps, the drawbridge steps over here, the Moride step above or the Lippert solid steps, I would rate the flex at 0 on a scale of 0 being none and 10 being the most, 0, because they're solid all the way down, right? Then if I had to, on that same scale, rate these Glowstep Revolution Uprising, I would say the flex is about a 3. So again, 0 being the best, 10 being the most flex, I'd put these right at about a 3. So that kind of gives you an idea of where they fall. Again, there is some flex, but it's very small. I don't feel unsafe or like it's not steady or stable as I go up and down. And again, the heavier you are, the more that is going to want to flex, especially when you're right there in the middle. But the big selling point on these is all that flexibility, and with that comes a small trade-off with some flex that I think is entirely worth it, considering all the other benefits that you get. So those are the dislikes I came up with here on this stair system. Really, in fairness, they're more like native characteristics given all the features and benefits of this stair system, because you've got to have those legs there. There's got to be a little bit of flex given all the flexibility. But I did want to call attention to all those things in the spirit of transparency. Again, all the features, the flexibility, the benefits far outweigh those minor nuances. Well, that pretty much covers the review on the product. Let me answer just a couple more questions and offer my final thoughts on this product. So first question would be, what is the install like? And I did an entirely separate video on that, very detailed on the install. So if you're interested, you can watch that. I'll put a card up for it and a link in the description below. But in short, I think the install is something the average RV owner can do yourself. It's really pretty simple. I think it'll probably take about an hour to 2 hours. You do have to have some tools for it, but they're pretty basic. So I think most people can handle that. The other question is, who should buy this in the end, really? And I think, someone who's seeking a premium product over the conventional, both the drawbridge steps, or if you've got, a step well with steps that hang out, this is truly a premium product with so many benefits, so much flexibility. And so if that's you, I think this is great. Also, it's a problem solver, right? You saw all the different problems that it can solve, whether it's clearance in a storage site like this, whether it's obstacles at your campsite. This is going to solve all those problems, and especially with that booster step down there. So if you're looking for something that's going to solve those problems, you've encountered them, you can relate to what I'm describing, this product is definitely for you. Now, if you're watching this and you work for an RV manufacturer or you're affiliated with one, let me just speak to you for a minute, because I think these steps would pair very nicely with the kind of up and coming overlanding category of RVs. Given all the flexibility, a lot of those overlanding rigs are kind of a premium product, a much higher priced. These would pair very nicely, especially given how they address the flexibility with different campsites and heights, given the nature of overlander style camping. I'll also say for premium RVs, premium travel trailers, premium fifth wheels, like my Jayco Pinnacle here, where you're paying a premium price and you're expecting more premium features, I also think these steps would pair very nicely, right? I mean, these steps are a premium product. They cost more than the drawbridge solid steps, right? But they're a premium product. They offer a premium experience. And so for customers like me, I would be willing to pay that little bit extra to get this premium product with my fifth wheel from the factory. In fact, if you're watching this and you are an RV owner and you'd like to see these Glowstep Revolution Uprising on your next RV from the factory, do me a favor and tag your manufacturer in the comments below and let them know, hey, I'd like to see these steps from the factory installed, and that'll kind of help them gauge interest level, because again, I think this is a premium product and it really pairs nicely with customers looking for a premium offering. Okay, so let me close out the video and offer my final thoughts on this product. You've heard me say it several times throughout the video, but I'm going to say it again. This is truly a premium product, and you get a premium experience out of it, completely worth every penny. There's the extreme flexibility that's going to contribute to less hassle, right, as an RV owner. I mean, my question is, why don't more brands use this as OEM equipment? Why doesn't this come factory installed on more RVs, especially in the premium space? I would like to know. I'm surprised, actually, after trying it out myself. I mean, I think it is superior, in my opinion, in so many ways to these steps. I mean, don't get me wrong, these drawbridge steps are great. They're very innovative, but there's so many more benefits and features that you get here on the Glowstep Revolution Uprising. And so I would like to see more manufacturers use these. I mean, I would almost argue that this might sound a little bit crazy and kind of like a step backwards, but I would almost argue that manufacturers should go back to putting step wells on their RVs. Do you remember those? 6, 7, 8 years ago, that was kind of the standard practice on RVs, where you had a step well, and instead of your steps folding up into your RV, they folded into a a step well. And the reason I say that is because remember, when you're folding these steps up into your RV, if it's raining or you're at the beach and you got sand, you can blow them off. I don't care. I've owned these steps for a long time and had many RVs. That stuff all still gets inside your RV. You just can't get it off. It shakes off and lands on your floor. And so I'm thinking if manufacturers went back to a conventional step well, Torklift also makes pretty much an identical version of these steps, the non-uprising version, that then fold up into that step well. And I think that would almost be the perfect marriage, because then you're getting all these benefits that I just presented, plus you don't have to worry about water or dust or things getting inside your RV every time you fold up and store those steps. They'd be stored out here. I mean, guys, am I missing something? Am I forgetting something? I had those same steps with a step well on my first 2 RVs, and I can't remember drawbacks like that. I mean, certainly if they're steel, they're going to rust a little bit more, but this is all aluminum. Well, hey, do me a favor and let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. I mean, should manufacturers go back to putting step wells on their RVs and then sourcing the Glowstep Revolution version that folds up into that step well, where you get all those benefits, but you don't have to worry about water debris getting folded back into your RV each time? Let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching.